Watching Asteroid City made me remember what movie magic feels like. Sometimes I like to just be reminded why I love movies, because, of course, you can do so much stuff with movies, in movies, that you can't do in the real world. That's where the movie magic comes from. And I think Wes Anderson is one of the best examples of directors who know how to do movie magic. I watched Moonrise Kingdom in preparation for this movie, which not only grew on me, but also made me realize that Wes Anderson movies are actually just kind of goofy. I mean, obviously, there's more to them than that, but these movies really can be surrealist, and that is so funny. I think from the outside, what people see with Wes Anderson is like this pretentious director who has really good shots that are all so carefully made. But really, he's kind of like a weird guy. His movies are really precise, and that's why no one who tries can actually recreate his style. But he is someone who knows how to make a movie that is just really fun to watch, and I mean, Asteroid City does it perfectly. It is able to actually appeal to a general audience in a pretty strong way. I mean, first of all, A-list cast. I mean, just looking at the Wikipedia cast list, you got like Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Maya Hawke, and in the lead role, you have Jason Schwartzman, who might have the best agent of all time because he's in both this and Spider-Verse in the same month. Aside from that, people do just seem to like Wes Anderson movies, especially for those, like, shots, the set design, and while this movie isn't, like, heightening that, like, it isn't better than his other movies in that department, it's still basically just more of what people love to see. It's incredible. It looks great. Of course, this movie takes place between two separate worlds, and the idea to have one of those worlds be in black and white and be in a completely different ratio is very brave, but I would expect no less from Wes Anderson. The guy blows me away at every turn, so it's not surprising that he did it again. One of my favorite technical aspects in this movie, though, has got to be the pan shot. This movie takes place in Asteroid City, and I mean, I gotta say, Wes Anderson does love naming movies after the setting they take place in. Asteroid City is kind of like this deserted town in the middle of nowhere in the 50s, and there is this shot that's very memorable where it sort of just pans through the entirety of the town, and you get to see all of the different characters in the ensemble cast all talking, and it's very memorable, like I said. Or sometimes a character will just go off screen, and then the camera will like pan all the way around to show them. It's just so intriguing to watch, and it's very creative. Something you definitely would not get in most other movies. So in general, I actually really can see why people are being drawn into this movie, but then you get delivered some of the weirdest stuff he's ever done, and I don't know how everyone feels about that. I mean, Twitter is loving this movie, but it's kind of funny that on Google, the Google reviews are like a 2.0 out of 5 on average, and that is kind of crazy. People really hate this movie on Google, of all places. But to get into the weird aspects of the plot, I'm gonna have to do spoilers. It was gonna be impossible for me to ever avoid spoilers with a movie this strange, and it's gonna be very exciting to talk about. But if you haven't seen it, bye. Gonna give people a couple seconds, and aliens. There are aliens in this movie. Well, just one, played by Jeff Goldblum, who is pretty perfect to play an alien, and the scene where the alien shows up is so funny. It has a huge impact on the plot, obviously, but I just gotta say, the surrealist comedy in this movie is incredible. You get jokes like Bryan Cranston just showing up in the wrong scene accidentally, or the Roadrunner going meet meet. Again, Wes Anderson movies can just be strange, and I like that. The alien is done perfectly in this movie. The guy just shows up, takes the meteorite, leaves with it, comes back later in the movie, gives it back, and just causes absolute mass hysteria on the world because nobody knows how to just deal with this. And he's just like a freaky little guy, as named by Letterboxd. However, the alien does tie into my perspective of what is like the theme of this movie, which is reactions and processing and how people work. To map this out, I'll start by just addressing that there are two worlds going on here. You got the outside world with like Edward Norton and Adrian Brody's characters, and you have the play in Asteroid City. But the theme of people not knowing how to react to something they don't understand is in between both of them. In the play, you have the alien plotline, because humanity just doesn't really know how to react to that, and they feel like they have to find out everything about it, even though to be honest, he didn't really seem to have that much impact on them. Like, sure, go find out where the aliens are living, but they're all in a panic over it, even though nothing has changed. There aren't really any actual effects from the alien on the world that humanity just doesn't do to themselves in the play. They all start to, like, not trust each other, and they keep trying to get out this information as if it's gonna either make or break the world. And that leads to the sort of climax scene in the play's world, where everyone, like, trashes the place as soon as the alien shows up for the second time, because they're just going crazy at this point. Everything is so hectic, even though, again, not that much happened, it's just something they don't know how to understand. This idea is definitely related to the play itself, but it's also related to the movie, which is just kind of weird, and in some respects hard to understand, because, I mean, a part of it does seem to just end. We only return to the play after the epilogue, and some people might be upset with that, but I don't think the play is the movie. The movie is the movie, and so we are still moving through the story of the movie. It's just a really weird one. And that is what brings me to The Outside World, where you have Edward Norton, Adrian Brody, Bryan Cranston, all those characters, and this is like a TV show being made about the process of making the play in the movie, which is, it's a big, confusing thing. I'm just gonna focus on the creation of the play. So Edward Norton's character, Conrad Earp, is the playwright, and it seems like a lot of the stuff that he says and he does is not fully understood by the actors and actresses who work with him. Sometimes it seems like he just throws stuff into the story for no reason, like Augie putting his hand on the burner. Like, why did he do that? Who knows? They seem to all think it doesn't mean anything when it does connect to the message. The people are obsessed with connecting the pieces of the play, but they don't understand the play itself, and that is a really fun way to connect it to the alien plotline. And this theme connects to 3 of my favorite lines in the movie, and I think 3 of the most important lines. First of all, there's a line that Jeffrey Wright's character says around the beginning of the movie when he says, "If you wanted to live a nice, quiet, peaceful life, you picked the wrong time to be born," or something like that. What he says here is essentially that humanity is going to have to react. They're going to have to process it because this is just the life that you're living. You're going to have to accept it because it's not going away, it's going to keep evolving, and you're going to have to deal with it. I think the irony of this comes with the fact that his character in the play is not very good at processing things in the right way either. He's the one who tries to mask everything from the public. He can't even listen to himself because this is a flaw with humanity, and he's part of it. Everyone has to sort of evolve with the times, or of course you get left behind. And the people in the play are so on board with it until something actually happens, and then they just all go insane. That line is just so smart. It's probably my favorite line in the movie, personally. It really stuck with me, and I knew it was going to stick with me. Another line in the real world, though, kind of tying everything together, is from Adrian Brody's character that basically just says, you don't have to, as in understand the play, you just have to keep telling the story. This is one that I think is sticking with a lot of people. This is a line that comes near the end of the movie, and I like how the Jeffrey Wright line has a lot to do with how people react to things, while this line has a lot to do with how people struggle to react to things and feel the need to understand everything. People really think they have to get it, but what this movie seems to be trying to do, at least I think, is prepare you to not get it, to not understand it. That's not to say that this movie is impossible to understand, that's what I'm trying to do right now. But, of course, I'm trying. It's not simple. It's not a simple movie, and I don't know if I'm right exactly. But the idea that people have to go through a process and think about it with this movie is really something that a lot of other movies tend to just forego. And the idea that that's like the whole concept of this one is so interesting. But there's one more line that seems to really, really want to be the main idea of this movie, being the "you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep" line. Because at the end of this movie, you kind of just get every character shouting it at the same time, which really just means, like, this is what we're trying to hammer home, this is what's meant to stick with you. And I think I get it. This is definitely a bit of a stretch, but I think that the fact that waking up is a reactionary thing, and falling asleep is the experience, is kind of tying it all into the main idea that I was just talking about. People need to realize that they need to experience things to kind of get a concept of life and even be living. Living a little is to try new things that you don't understand that might even scare you a little bit, and going to sleep is something that kind of lowers your guard. You really don't know what's going to happen when you go to sleep, but you can't go through the process at all if you don't do it. I'm fairly certain these three lines could all be tied together into like a completely different thought, a completely different message, but this is what I took away from it, and if I'm right, this is really cool. I really love this idea. But there is one more scene to mention, being the Margot Robbie scene, which I just gotta say before we get into how incredible this scene is, it is so brave to put Margot Robbie in one scene in the movie. It is such an A-list cast. It's so funny. It makes me think that people actually really want to be in these movies, and that's cool. So, the context of this scene is that after having a conversation with Adrien Brody's character, the actor playing Augie runs into Margot Robbie, who would have played his character's wife, who is dead in the play, but they cut her only scene. And this has had a pretty decent impact on her career, and she's now working as like an understudy in some other play. And the conversation that they have is about that scene, and the scene is really vivid. The description really feels like it puts you in that scene so that it doesn't even matter that it was cut because you can feel it and you know what it looked like. You can understand it. With Augie's actor not feeling like he understands the play, he's able to actually understand it when she talks about this scene, and it seems to help him understand his character because his character doesn't know how to get over the death of his wife in the play. But the idea of moving on and letting life take you is again explored in this scene in a fantastic performance from Margot Robbie, who just does so good for a one-scene character. This description of loss is so perfect because it's something that everyone goes through, and of course it's going to be relatable to nearly everyone at some point. You really need to make this scene feel right, because everyone knows how they process and how they react, and this just brings it together so perfectly. It's such a complex scene and a very difficult one to do, but they pulled it off clearly because people are already calling this one of the best scenes in like the history of cinema. And while I would have to go and rewatch it a second time, which I'm going to do, I can see where they're coming from. I think this is a scene that's really going to connect to people in a very personal way. I think the idea of people just needing to live a little and not having to overthink everything all the time is a pretty beautiful message for movies, which can feel like an escape. This movie is funny and it's beautiful, but what it really has is a deep concept and a deep message. I love the message of this movie. I love how it ties everything together. I really like this one a lot. And I like that this comes from Wes Anderson, who is kind of showing that he loves the way that he makes his movies. I think this is a guy who loves movies and loves his own craft. I'm going to give this movie a 9. I think that this is one of the best movies of the year so far. I was very hyped for it, and it just encouraged me to watch more Wes Anderson. I'm going to check out Grand Budapest Hotel. I've already seen it, but I kind of forgot it, and I want to see it again. I've seen some clips of it on Twitter ever since the hype for this movie went up, and it looks so good. I think Wes Anderson is going to become one of my favorite directors.